Hours after drones were used to attack the Jammu airbase, 2 more drones were spotted near the Kaluchak military station, triggering a major security scare. The first drone was spotted around 11:45 at night. This was on the 27th of June, and then another around 2:40 this morning. But the major threat was averted by the alertness of the army on ground. Soldiers on sentry duty, they learned to have opened fire. They fired multiple rounds at the drone. India Today's Sunil Ji Bhatt brings us a top story.
After drone attack at the Jammu Air Force Station on Sunday, no stopping drone terror in Jammu. Hours after a drone carrying 2 IED payloads rocked the high-security airbase, around 8 kilometers away, 2 more drones were spotted at the high-security military base in the Kaluchak area, triggering another major security scare. The first drone was spotted at 11:45 p.m. on Sunday, while another at 2:40 a.m. on Monday. Soon, a high alert was sounded and quick reaction teams sprung into action. Our alert and proactive troops opened 20 to 25 rounds at these 2 drones, thwarting the major threat. But both drones managed to fly away in the darkness.
Now, the military establishment has swung into action. Intense search operation is being carried out both in Ratnuchak and Kaluchak military stations areas. And in the VRs, when the drones were witnessed, the alert security forces fired at those drones. 20 to 25 rounds of fire were fired by the security forces. That's what the army is saying. But soon those drones vanished from that spot.
Sources say that these drones were quadcopters, which are used by Pakistan Army and Pakistan Rangers. Terrorists too use them for recce purposes and need no particular surface for launch. This small 4-rotor drone is operated by a remote control, making it difficult to nab the person operating it. Search operations are underway to locate the drones. A high alert has been sounded in Jammu and particularly across military stations. The use of small drones raises the security alarm as they are capable of avoiding traditional security measures. In almost all cases, operators remain behind cover and explosives can be dropped with great accuracy. Through drones, attacks can be carried out from a position of safety. Drones are relatively quiet and difficult to detect. 2 days, multiple drones creating upheaval, but failing to wreak havoc thanks to our alert forces. With Sunil Ji Bhatt in Jammu, Bureau Report, India Today.
This is the first time that drone-mounted IEDs have been used in India to target an IAF base. But drones give terrorists and their sponsors a major edge. There is plausible deniability. There is this advantage of standoff attack, low radar signature, so very difficult to catch the cross-section on a radar and virtually impossible to detect. Terrorists have used drones in the past in Syria, in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia. But now there is this clear and present danger even in India. Shiv Arur and Abhishek Bhalla get us details.
Tiny little carriers of terror, with nothing but the wind beneath their little rotors. They've signaled a new nightmare for Indian security. We've long been in the age of military drones, but it's the most simple of these unmanned air machines. Tiny little hobby quadcopters that are now the compellers of India's sleepless nights. The monster question: can India stop mini-drone warfare, or are we doomed to be overwhelmed? The bad news first. There's no blanket solution, and the literally miniature size of the threat means there's never going to be 100% defense against it. A comprehensive approach is going to be necessary. First things first, traditional air defense radars at our military stations and airports are programmed for large targets like aircraft, helicopters, and bigger drones. If they're calibrated to detect small hobby drones, even birds would set off radar alarms, overwhelming the system and causing chaos and confusion. A Apart from sanitization of areas around sensitive installations, specialized equipment does exist to counter drones in flight. But these again are hit or miss, with no guarantee of full protection. As you can imagine, the Indian Air Force and Bureau of Civil Aviation are scrambling to address the threat to installations. Most technologies, including anti-drone jammers and systems, are deployed in the terminal stage of a rogue drone's flight path, the last 100 meters or so, when there's very little reaction time. It would therefore be hard for a defense system to precisely identify a rogue drone's vulnerabilities and then deploy countermeasures. India's own DRDO says that its anti-drone device can bring down micro-drones at a distance of up to 3 kilometers and use lasers to target them from distances of over 1 kilometer away. Another security force operating under the Home Ministry recently imported a high-powered electromagnetic system, which zaps drones with an electromagnetic pulse, causing them to crash. But these systems could not be deployed at airports because of the risk to incoming aircraft. So you begin to see the complications in anti-drone defense. The outlook remains unfortunately bleak. Many existing countermeasures will be powerless against a swarm attack, a pack of drones flying into their targets from multiple directions. The next big scare began in Jammu, for which there are few answers yet. With Sandeep Unithan in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
I have the most authoritative voices on the subject joining me on India First. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni is former Director General of Infantry. Group Captain Augustine Vinod is a former fighter pilot. He's flown the MiG-21s, he's flown the Mirages, he knows all about drones. Also with me on the broadcast, India Today's Shiv Arur and Sandeep Unnithan, two men who know more about matters military than most. But before I come to our guests, I quickly want to take you through a SWOT analysis. Why is this a paradigm shift, or is it in India's war on terror? Protecting vital assets, vital points. Till now, it was all about erecting high perimeter walls, having sentry posts, having jammers in convoys. But the threat this time is from the skies. It's not restricted just to military camps and convoys, but almost across the country. Cricket stadium, malls, markets, temples, stock exchange. Protecting every asset or point. Is it even possible? Clearly, it's easier said than done.
You've been watching the news of the mini drone attacks in Jammu. Dinky little plastic drones triggering a state of high alert. Bits of plastic, sparking fear and terror in an age of high-tech warfare. But you're probably also thinking, can't India also conduct mini drone strikes? The simple theoretical answer is yes. Converting a hobby drone into a grenade carrier isn't a complicated task and can be done at low cost without much effort. These silent killers are hard to detect and neutralize in time and can be used to wage war with plausible deniability. But if your question is whether India conducts such mini drone strikes already, well, that's where things begin to blur. Let's tell you what we know for sure. For starters, like we said, rigging an IED or grenade to a drone isn't difficult. Several medium performance hobby drones can easily be integrated for such tasks. Second, Indian forces have been scouting mini drones purpose-built for such strikes, like the Israeli Firefly seen in these pictures, a helicopter-style mini drone packing a sensor and warhead basically used by infantry teams to hunt down, pinpoint, and attack kamikaze style. These devastating drones have recently been ordered by the Israeli Defense Forces and could soon find a place with Indian infantry teams. And finally, Indian drone companies, which already supply high-quality drones to the Indian military, are looking to offer armed varieties of their quadcopters, giving the military the option of purchasing specialized, tiny hunter-killers.
There are multiple things shift. So there are various category of armed drones that will be required, and there are reports that a significantly large number is going to be required. However, as a company, Idea Forge is probably not going to look at arming them ourselves. At the very best, we may look at partnering with people who want to, put such payload. Now, whether do we have payload capability or not, we do have payload capability on some of our systems. However, we are probably only looking at partnerships in that domain. So we're going to be exploring this via partners.
The utility of drone attacks like these is they're difficult to trace back and provide a compelling low investment effect on the adversary. Whether India will deploy such tactics remains to be seen. Bureau Report, India Today.
Group Captain Vinod, how does one protect an airbase and aircraft and helicopters and radars and all our assets from enemy drones?
And Shiv covered it so beautifully. There are three aspects, three bullet points, Gaurav, to drones. One is surveillance, second is data stealing or penetration as it is called, and third is, of course, what we are seeing, the strike. This hogs the maximum, limelight that it has come and exploded and created certain damage. But what, in my opinion, what is of a bigger damage is something which is unseen and takes your data and goes away. A drone like this is a disposable drone is what we call it. SFs use it. I mean, SFs can use it.
Yes.
You can see them being used by many special forces in many countries. Now, the information that it provides, the tactical information and the timely tactical information that it provides is much more lethal. And the question is, how are you going to stop such drones? You tell me, how will you stop such drones? So, like Shiv covered, and I don't know, our viewers will be aghast to know, the cheaper the drone, better the technology. And it is confusing, isn't it? That is because these the drones come with open source hardware. So the one which I'm holding in my hand, it is the complete heart of the drone. It has everything that 10 degree of freedom accelerometers. It can hold 128 GB of data. It has multiple input output ports, including data link, camera, onboard recording, everything put together, and it can give so many outputs to so many servos other than the motors themselves. So you imagine a 700, 800 kilo autopilot has been miniaturized to 10, 12, 16 grams of an autopilot, and this becomes the heart of the drone. And the most important thing, Gaurav, is this equipment. This is a hybrid GNSS system. This has GLONASS, Bedu, GPS, the American GPS, and even the Navik version is coming in. It also has something called space-based augmentation system called the SBAS, like Gagan and Galileo. Now, when you have these kind of pinpoint accuracy providing GNSS, the GPS system on the drone, it will give you a capability of dropping the payload without any human intervention. Without any human intervention, just by pre-programming, it will give you an accuracy of 10 to 30 centimeters.
How do you counter the threat?
Now the question is, how to counter the threat? You need to pick up the threat. Now, to pick up the threat also, Gaurav, there are three aspects to it. A, you pick it up using radar, but to a drone like this, how will you pick it up using radar? Or a drone like this, which is slightly bigger in size, it is completely made out of plastic. The only metal portion is one which is here. The rest, everything is polymer or plastic. How will you pick this up? So then comes the next thing that Shiv covered. That is the data link that the drone uses with the controller.
Yes.
Even that has a counter, because most of these drones, especially these kamikaze ones, are autonomously flying. That means it is completely electronically silent. It is electronically silent. If it is electronically silent, you cannot triangulate him. Now, the third option that comes is using the tip of the propeller, the sound that it makes, you can probably pick it up, and for which the environmental noise has to be less. In an urban environment, it becomes even more challenging. Now, like Shiv covered and you showed it on the animation, it is the last 100 meters to about a kilometer is when you will be able to prosecute these drones. And the best prosecution method, Gaurav, I can tell you, is a wall of bullets, which is called the Close-in Weapon System, CIWS.
Yes.
Using laser is good idea, but the laser has to stay onto the drone for some
least
time
5
for the laser
seconds.
to take effect. Yes. Now, if you have 200 of such coming towards you from a particular direction, how many lasers will you fire and how many laser firing
Absolutely.
lines will you have? Secondly, it is going to be a VP protection, that is vital point protection, not vital area protection.
Yes.
That, like you exactly covered. I mean, so many vital areas are there. Are you going to give drone dome to all of them? We are not, Israel is slightly bigger than Chandni Chowk. And whereas you look at the size of India, from Gandarbal, Handwara to Sangam to down to Rajasthan across, and we have a rogue country across, which is Pakistan.
Oh, absolutely. And
So,
look at the expanse all the way from Ladakh to Lakshadweep. And I'll just come back to this point. And I also want to bring in Shiv, who wants to chip in. Shiv, this actually marks a paradigm shift in the way we deal with terror.
Gaurav, in many ways, this is a paradigm shift, but one, that has made itself known for many years now. The use of such drones, the capability of such drones, the fact that they're a very low investment option, with high returns, especially in this kind of asymmetric warfare space, is well known. And while India has been preparing for it, what happened at the Jammu Air Force Station and then subsequently in Kaluchak have basically signaled that this era of warfare is very much on. It's also very ironic, Gaurav, because remember, we live in an age of artificial intelligence,
Yes.
advanced drone warfare, UCAVs and militarized drones have been used for decades together now, in fact. But what we're seeing here, the drones being deployed in this particular paradigm are the most rudimentary drones. These are drones, you can pick up from a shop, in any of India's cities. They're mass-produced by China, available all over the world, nothing specifically militarized about them, and that's what makes it so scary. The fact that they're easily accessible, you don't need many skills to actually learn to fly them. You don't need, that much infrastructure to rig them with explosives or grenades. The kind of infrastructure that already exists plentifully across the border in Pakistan and in sleeper cells here in India. And therefore, if you put all of these things together, it brings in this paradigmatic shift, which is low cost, low investment, low skill with very high returns. And we all know what the implications of deploying such drones in large numbers can actually be.
General Kulkarni, if we were to look at the last major terror attack, which was Pulwama, in Pulwama, at least the terrorists had to rig a vehicle with IEDs and then slam it into the convoy. No longer will terrorists have to do that. They can just stand back at some hillock while the convoy passes and then use these kamikaze drones and disappear before the security forces realize what's happened. Let me take a moment and try and reestablish that link with General Kulkarni. General Kulkarni, if you can hear me, how does one deal with this threat? And Sandeep, what's the thinking in the government? How do you neutralize this threat? I will take a moment and reestablish that link both with General Kulkarni and Sandeep Unithan. But Group Captain Vinod, Balakot after Pulwama was a message. It was a strategic message, and we used aircraft that you have flown yourself. This was a message that was understood both by state actors and non-state actors. 2 years down the line, does a state sponsor of terror need a refresher course?
it's a good question, Gaurav. And fortunately, or however you want to look at it, I was the Director Air Defense when Balakot happened, and I exactly know what happened. And that time we gave them a bloody nose, and there is no two ways about it. But coming back to the question that you asked, high value target protection is going to be a big challenge. Those vehicles which go ahead and behind an high value target, protecting high value target from IED, has now got another extra work to do, which is protecting the high value target from aerial attack. Now, that is going to be a very big challenge. Till that challenge is completely not addressed, holistically, that means you have to give them a tiered defense. The high value target is going to be vulnerable. And second question that the question that you threw up on, and Shiva alluded to,
Yes.
flying these drones is fairly simple. Let me hold out the this thing for you. And this is how you just touch on this, and it goes from A to B to C. And the map that I'm holding out is a free map, that is Google Earth map, that is available. And these Google Earth maps today are available at fairly high accuracy for the planes. I'm not talking about the hills. Hills, it has got problems. But in the planes, it is fairly accurate. Now, these are the challenges with which one needs to look at the shift of operations, especially the low intensity conflict, as well as the anti-terror operations that has taken a new face now.
Yes.
Now, there is another thing which you cover, two things that you covered, Gaurav, which I'm completely in agreement, is the countering this attack with another drone attack on Pakistan. Is it the solution? I tend to agree. So, and second is now the terrorists don't have to be a bold terrorist.
Yes.
Earlier, a terrorist was a bold terrorist. He kafan band ke aaya tha. He came to die. He doesn't have to anymore. Now you see the number of people who will now get lured to do this, because now he can do his job and run away,
and he can
do
run
his
away,
job and live to fight another day.
Yes.
So these are the things that we need to sit down and brainstorm as to how are we going to tackle this threat.
Frankly, we should have sat down and brainstormed this when these attacks were taking place in Syria, in Iraq and Saudi Arabia, when their oil pipeline was targeted. But now, the terror and danger is in our backyard. So, Sandeep, what's the thinking in the government? How does one counter this threat? You can't have anti-drones shields all across the country.
Sandeep is probably not hearing you.
Sandeep, can you hear me? Okay, let me spend a moment and try and reestablish that link. We are having an audio issue both with Sandeep and with General Kulkarni. But let me bring in Shiv Arur once again. Shiv, what are countermeasures that are available to India at this point?
The bad news, Gaurav, is that there is no blanket solution in the face of drone attacks of this kind. India does have equipment. India has sensors. India has, air defense radars, all kinds of equipment to look out for things like this. But the problem is there are gaps everywhere. Radars are not calibrated for such small targets. If you calibrate them for drones, you end up creating a situation of confusion and chaos with too many, alarms every time some small thing passes by. India is currently developing, both in the government sector as well as the private sector, is creating high-frequency jammers, anti-drone systems that can be deployed. The DRDO is building one that's been tested by the SPG. They've also been given field trials by various police forces. There are high-powered magnetic systems that have been imported by the Border Security Force and probably used. But the bad news, again, is that none of these systems have provided a kind of holistic defense against these drones.
Yes.
And ultimately, when you face a devious, asymmetric adversary, who is aware of your gaps, is willing to exploit each and every one of those gaps to see how deep he can actually penetrate, you begin to see that this entire picture of defense actually begins to fall apart. So it's as important to own this kind of equipment as it is to teach the adversary a lesson and set an example.
Very interesting.
That should they try and mount attacks of this kind, there will be a very heavy price to pay. Because once those drones are in the air, rest assured it's going to be very difficult to intercept them.
Unless there are costs on the adversary, unless whether it's Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed or whichever terrorist organization or countries that back these terrorists, unless there are costs imposed on them, India will just continue to waste precious money, spend precious money in trying to protect every inch, every nook and cranny, and that's virtually impossible. Because today it was an Air Force station, tomorrow it could be a military convoy, day after it could be, God forbid, a crowded cricket stadium, a mall, a cinema hall, temples, the stock exchange. Just look at the places that Pakistan state-sponsored terror has targeted in our country in the past decade. Remember 2006 when 200 people were killed when Pakistan-backed terrorists targeted the Mumbai train system, or 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks, a five-star hotel, an eatery, roads, railway station, or the J&K assembly or our parliament. Terrorists can use a drone-mounted improvised explosive device and cause mayhem, whether it's a military target or a non-military target. So what are options for India in terms of technology? Let's find out.
First, the Jammu Air Station, and then the Kaluchak military station. Both just kilometers from the international border, where the sponsors of such attacks are likely situated. But the tiny range of such drones makes it likely that while they were handled from across, they were piloted from Indian territory for sure. So you're probably wondering in that case, are such drone attacks a threat only in our border areas, or could they hit our cities as well? The straight answer is yes, cities are most definitely vulnerable to mini drone warfare. Think about it. Terrorist sleeper cells and bomb-making units can easily access drones and explosive materials. And such tactics could be used to hit crowded areas in our cities anywhere. How to stop bomber drones, for instance, from crashing into crowds at the Kumbh Mela or flying directly into a VVIP enclosure at an important public event? Unlike open spaces around military stations, detecting drones would be even more difficult in a built-up urban environment. India's national capital, for instance, has recognized the drone threat for years. Task forces appointed by the Delhi Police and Civil Aviation departments have been identifying lists of sensitive installations in Delhi that need anti-drone protection, and have been drawing up a standard operating procedure for law enforcement agencies on what to do in the event of a rogue strike in the national capital. India's Republic Day parade in January 2018 was among the first public events where security forces were specifically equipped with radars and anti-aircraft guns to counter rogue drones. Crowded tourist destinations of India are also on alert to the drone threat. The Goa police have developed and deployed a system to track and identify rogue drones, especially over crowded areas, using radio frequency scanner technology. As the implications of the Jammu drone attack sink in, such efforts in the country will be sharpened and accelerated across our cities as well. There isn't a moment to lose. Bureau Report, India Today.
Group Captain Augustine, if I can bring you in once again. India neither has the resources, or should even precious resources be squandered to protect every inch of strategic locations. What is a cost-effective option, sir?
A very good question, Gaurav. In fact, I was just speaking to a very senior officer and telling him, I did a back of the envelope on an Excel sheet. I did a calculation which you were just mentioning to find out. I mean, I have fair idea of the VAs and VPs all across the border, at least across the Pakistan areas. Without putting the place's name, I just did a simple mathematical calculation. It comes out to a mind-boggling figure for setting up any kind of a drone defense. And that kind of money, we do not have. No country has. Now we have to work out what is the best possible solution. Now, 99% of these drones, or I would say 95% of these drones, Gaurav, it works on a radio link with the controlling base station. A radio link, something like this. This has a range of, say, 3 kilometers, and it is continuously talking to the drone. You cannot hijack this radio link because this works on something called frequency spectrum technology. It is hopping frequency and it is encrypted. But what you can do is have these 2.4 gigahertz and 5.4 gigahertz jammers. Once these jammers come on, the communication link immediately breaks with the drone, and the drone is programmed to do something called an RTH, or return to home. and it starts to go back home immediately.
Okay.
The moment it starts to go back home, you will know the direction in which it is going back home. You will also be able to probably catch the perpetrator. But quickly, for the advantage of our viewer, to give you a perspective of what the drone size would have been, the one which came and dropped a payload of 4 to 5 kilos. This is a mock-up that I'm holding up in front of me. So as to, for viewers to get an idea of the size, if you notice on top, I have rigged up about 6 kilos of payload right on top of here.
Okay.
And it is a quadcopter. And look at the size of the motor is very, very small. And this is the size of the drone that may have come and done the strike at Jammu. So that is for putting the shape and the size in perspective. And in this, the entire metal thing is just those 4 motors. The rest, everything is either, like Shiv covered, is either plastic or composites or some kind of a polymer. In this case, it is completely a polymer.
And in the coming years, it will become even more high-tech. So whatever technology you may have today, Sandeep, may just be ineffective tomorrow. Isn't offense then the best defense? If the adversary can do it, we can do it better and with the same plausible deniability.
Yes, absolutely, Gaurav. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. But the point is that where do you strike, and how do you strike? And these, you're now getting into the arena of gray zone warfare. But coming back to the point about detecting these drones, I mean, it's incredibly difficult to detect it with the kind of radars that we have around military installations right now. You're looking at drones of the kind Wing Commander Augustine just held up, which have a very small radar cross-section.
Yes.
You're looking at something that has the cross-section of a bird. And you need to have high-frequency radars that have the ability to distinguish between a bird and a drone, which then means that you need AI-driven algorithms to, tell a drone from, say, a flock of birds, for instance. I mean, this is a completely new era of, tracking and detection. And the thing is, Gaurav, that we've had, warnings in the past. The government has been pretty proactive in, putting together committees to study this. The Bureau of Civil Aviation and Security, for instance, I know 2 years back began a study of, counter UAS technologies. And they did put together a very exhaustive report on this. They worked with industry.
But the fact remains, Sandeep, that report must be gathering dust somewhere. The fact that terrorists have succeeded in launching that attack and striking the Jammu Air Base, and with drones spotted over Kaluchak, which was attacked by Pakistani terrorists even in the past. We had military families as fatalities in that Kaluchak terror attack. Way back in 2001, if I remember the year correctly.
Yes, Gaurav. And the thing with these drones is that it adds another layer of plausible deniability to the kind of attacks that you're going to, face. Because, I mean, here you don't see the perpetrator. The drone comes out of nowhere, carries out an attack and goes back. And that, to my mind, is the USP of this attack in Jammu. That
no, then the question is, how do you counter it? You can't have these very expensive radar systems all across your country, borders, and with the enemy within. In depth areas, any place is a target for terrorists. It could be a mall, it could be a marketplace, it could be a cricket stadium. Jal Kulkarni, is offense then the best defense? If it's plausible deniability for them, there is plausible deniability for you.
100%, Gaurav. Yeah, again, let me just clarify. All UAVs are drones, but all drones are not UAV. And therefore, these small little helicopter-looking objects which are light in weight and can come in swarms also. And of course, what Sandeep just spoke about, the radar non-detectability. But yes, the airspace management is very important. Even regulating the acquisition of drones is very important. All these needs to be done, and therefore we can have detection, we can have destruction. The detection, just not by the kind of radars which are detecting helicopters flying and fixed-wing aircrafts and fighter aircrafts flying, but with the airspace management, we know exactly the kind of radars which will be detecting drones. Maybe acoustic ones also, maybe even optical ones, maybe the radio frequency one, and then be able to detect and destroy. Until and unless we have proactive means, it would be the cost and consequences to the adversary must be so very high that it must make it impossible for it to be able to launch it. Because now, in conjunction with the militants on ground and, well, not losing risk of human beings, now they have attacks from all fronts.
And
Therefore,
Group Captain Augustine, Vinod, if I may, how do you impose costs on the adversary? You've seen what the adversary has done here. There's plausible deniability. But then they've lost their aircraft in the past to terror attacks. Is that the only thing? Because what was the impact of Balakot on the psyche of the Pakistan security forces?
Very good question, Gaurav. Now let's take this in a futuristic timeline. Now he attacks you with drone, for which we don't have countermeasures. I mean, very little countermeasures, but it is not adequate. 90% of the drones will get through safe. We do the same thing. Now, where will this escalation ladder stop? Where will both of you come down to say, okay, we will not do this to each other? Because currently, we do not have the technology, and in times to come, for a drone like this, we may not have the technology for long, long time to come.
Yes.
Now, how are we going to address this issue? And the question that, I mean, the aspect that General just raised about the tracking of drones and airspace management, I just want to give you a little insight into what is called a UTM, Unmanned Traffic Management System. In fact, our Unmanned Traffic Management System, since I am in touch with the world Unmanned Traffic Management System, including Belgium, US, and etc., ours is one of the best. We have something called NPNT, no permission, no takeoff. So our regulations for people who abide by the law is one of the best, or in fact, I would stick my neck out and say it is the best.
But terrorists and non-state actors don't follow the rules.
Absolutely. So we can shift, or sift weed from chaff very easily.
Okay.
We have mechanisms in place to sift weed from chaff. Now, when you sifted the weed to one side, now we have to look at only the chaff. So that major aspect has been addressed. In times to come. The DG Sky is going to get operational, and we will have the good guys identified. Now we have to only look at bad guys, out of which, like I told you, Gaurav, 95% of these bad guys will get sorted with pure, simple 2.4, 5.8 jammer. Now left with only those 5% autonomous, electronically silent guys. Okay. Those are the guys we have to be worried about.
Fair enough. I've run out of time on this part of the debate, but we will track. And it's such a privilege, Group Captain Augustine Vinod, that you, General Kulkarni, Shiv and Sandeep joined me on India First on this very interesting and a very potent threat that our country faces. And we will continue this discussion in the days and weeks ahead. But up next, Twitter provokes